What is the most disgusting thing you have ever done that you took pleasure in? My wife and I had two wonderful daughters, 13 and 10 years old, in a seemingly healthy relationship. At some point, things started to feel off. Suddenly, she became very attached to her phone, deactivated the save password feature on our shared computer, and started receiving calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room. You can probably guess what it was. After 15 years of marriage, I was hoping it wasn't what it so obviously seemed to be. Then, one day, when she said she was going to spend time with the girls, I decided to follow her. Sure enough, I found her going to a hotel to meet a guy I'll call Steve. Saying it was a gut punch would be an understatement. I cried for an hour straight. After finishing my phase of self-pity, I decided the best course of action was to get even. I thought of several scenarios, some of which may or may not have involved confronting Steve physically. Eventually, I chose something more civilized and, more importantly, legal, but just barely. The first part of the plan was to gather evidence. I could have just taken a picture, but I had something better in mind. One day, when my wife was at work and the kids were at school, I installed small hidden cameras and microphones that I had purchased. Thanks to the layout of our bedroom, I managed to position one perfectly overlooking the bed. However, I didn't use them while I was at home. A few days later, I suggested to my wife that on the second weekend from then, I should take the girls on a trip and stay the night away. Normally, I was the one responsible for cooking and took a much more active role in raising the girls, showing them more patience and attention. She was usually busy working or drinking, so me going on a trip alone with the girls wasn't unusual. 2 weeks passed, during which I organized everything and contacted a lawyer to draft a separation agreement that included me keeping the house and custody of the kids. I went on the trip, tried not to give anything away to the girls, and waited to see if Steve and my wife would take the bait. When I returned, I checked the weekend recordings, and sure enough, it was a 36-hour fest. When they weren't doing what you can imagine, the dialogue was even more revealing. I found out that Steve had a wife. But the worst part was hearing how they talked about me. I expected attempts to destroy my self-esteem, but hearing things like how my friend was smaller than a pinky finger, something that had always been a personal insecurity, and how I didn't satisfy her was devastating. The most painful part was hearing her share my deepest secrets and embarrassing stories that I had only trusted her with. They even laughed about a time in my life when I was hopeless and, well, it's better not to say it. At that point, I had no doubt what I needed to do. The next day, I waited for the kids to leave, but before my wife went out, I let everything seem normal. I kissed her on the cheek, wished her a good day at work, and watched her walk out the door with the same false tranquility she had carried over the past few months. But inside, I had already decided that would be the last day she thought she had everything under control. As soon as she left, I got to work. I took the recordings and calmly edited the videos, selecting the most impactful clips that clearly showed the betrayal. It wasn't just about the physical act, though that was enough, but also about the things she said about me and shared with Steve, things I never imagined a wife would expose to a stranger. It was humiliating, cruel, and at the same time, exactly what I needed to turn the tables. That same day, I sent messages to all her family members and close friends, including her parents, sisters, cousins, and some of her coworkers. I invited them to a surprise party to celebrate a special moment in our marriage. I didn't specify what. I used a neutral excuse, something like, I want to celebrate our union and the family we've built. This ensured she wouldn't suspect anything until the crucial moment. I spent the day decorating the house, buying drinks, food, and even a cake. I didn't want anything to seem unusual. However, my real preparation was hidden on the computer and my phone. I created a presentation that mixed happy family photos and, at the very end, included the captured videos. In the evening, the guests started arriving. My wife came home a little later from work, seemingly surprised and even touched by the gesture. She laughed, chatted with the guests, and seemed to suspect nothing. "You're amazing for organizing all this," she said, hugging me. I returned the hug, but inside, I felt a mix of nervousness and a morbid satisfaction for what was about to happen. After a few hours of socializing, I asked for everyone's attention. "I'd like to show you something special," I announced with a smile that masked my anger. I turned on the projector, and the presentation began. The first images were innocent. Pictures of us together, moments with the kids, memories everyone there shared. My wife watched the screen, smiling, unaware of what was coming. Then everything changed. Without warning, the screen showed the first recording, her entering the bedroom with Steve. The sound of their laughter and conversation filled the room. The guests fell silent, some in disbelief, others uncomfortable. My wife froze, her eyes wide. "This is what you do while I take care of our home, our daughters," I said, my voice calm but full of disdain. She began to mumble something, but the next scene cut off any attempt at an explanation. A conversation between her and Steve where they both laughed at my insecurities, mocked me, and she revealed intimate details I never thought could be exposed like that. The next few minutes were chaos. The room was in shock. Some family members looked at her with disgust. Others stared at me, unable to believe I had the courage to expose everything like this. My wife, desperate, tried to turn off the projector, but I was ready. "Sit down," I shouted firmly, making her stop. She fell into a chair, tears streaming down her face. When the last video ended, the room was utterly silent. I picked up my phone and, without anyone noticing, started recording the environment, the reactions, the looks of disapproval, and the humiliation on her face. While she tried to explain herself to the guests, it was already too late. The damage was done. Later that night, with the video of the party edited, including the recordings of her betrayal, I sent everything directly to Steve's wife on Instagram. I didn't need to say anything. The images spoke for themselves. A few hours later, I got a notification. She saw the message. It didn't take long for the bomb to explode on the other side as well. In the end, as I watched the chaos unfold, I realized something. Despite everything, I had felt pleasure in executing every detail of this revenge. Yes, it was cruel, it was disgusting, but for some reason, it was exactly what I needed to move on. And now, her life would never be the same. After the party, everything changed for good. My wife, now ex-wife, tried to approach me several times in the following weeks. She cried, begged, and swore it had all been a mistake. But what irritated me most was that she never truly apologized for what she had done. There was no genuine regret for the cruel words, the secrets shared, or the betrayal itself. She only lamented being caught. That confirmed what I already knew. I needed to move on, but not before ensuring she fully faced the consequences of her actions. My first priority was taking care of my daughters. They were young but not stupid. Even though I had kept them away from the party, what happened eventually reached their ears somehow. Maybe a relative, maybe whispers at school from parents who discussed the gossip. They came to me with questions, and I tried to be as honest as possible without sharing unnecessary details. "Your mom made choices that hurt our family," I said. "And unfortunately, that means things won't be the same anymore." It was hard to see the disappointment in their eyes, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't shield them from everything. This mess was a direct result of their mother's actions, and she would have to deal with the consequences. Meanwhile, my ex-wife was starting to feel the weight of what had happened. The public humiliation in front of friends and family was only the beginning. She tried to return to work as if nothing had happened, but the environment was no longer the same. People whispered in the hallways, and she became a pariah during lunches and meetings. A week later, she quit her job. She claimed she was being bullied, but the truth was she couldn't face people anymore. Steve, on the other hand, disappeared almost completely. His wife, after receiving the evidence I sent, filed for an immediate divorce. From what I heard from mutual sources, he also lost his job, likely because the scandal reached his bosses. It was a double blow for him. No wife, no job, and it seemed no courage to face the shame. But for me, that wasn't enough. As much as it had made an impact, I wanted to ensure this wasn't just a fleeting moment. I wanted the truth to be exposed so no one would ever believe a softened version my ex-wife or Steve might try to tell. So, I started editing the videos. I removed every part where they mentioned my insecurities or shared intimate details about me. I didn't want my name to be tied to this filth more than necessary. My goal was for them to be seen for what they truly were, without turning myself into the target of malicious comments. Once I was done, I uploaded the video, to several platforms. On YouTube, under a pseudonym, I described it as a story of betrayal and exposure. On social media platforms like Instagram and Twitter, I used fake accounts to share the content, ensuring it reached people who could amplify the reach. Friends, coworkers, and even strangers who love juicy gossip. I knew it wasn't entirely ethical, but at that moment it felt justified. The impact was almost immediate. The story began circulating quickly, gaining traction on forums and discussion groups. Comments like, "This woman destroyed her own family," and "Cheating is disgusting, but mocking someone's insecurities is even worse," flooded the posts. My ex-wife became the target of massive criticism. Within days, she deleted all her social media accounts and isolated herself completely. The public shame was unbearable for her. Should I feel guilty? Maybe, but I didn't. For too long, I had been humiliated in silence, carrying the pain of knowing that the person I shared my life with had betrayed me in every possible way. Now, she was experiencing a fraction of what I felt, and honestly, it gave me a sense of relief. The only regret I carried was the impact it had on my daughters. Despite my efforts to protect them, they ended up knowing more than they should. Friends at school started commenting, and inevitably, they pieced things together. My oldest daughter, in particular, was deeply hurt. "Why did Mom do this?" she asked me one day, tears streaming down her face. I didn't have an answer that could comfort her. All I could do was reaffirm that, regardless of what their mother had done, I would always be there for them. "You two are my priority now," I told them both. "And I'll do everything I can to ensure you have the best life possible." In the following months, I started rebuilding my life. I found a therapist to deal with the emotional scars and did my best to create a stable environment for my daughters. They still saw their mom occasionally, but the relationship seemed tense and distant. As for my ex-wife, I heard she moved to another city, trying to start over. The last thing I heard about Steve was that he was living on his brother's couch, trying to get back on his feet. I doubt either of them learned any valuable lessons, but honestly, I don't care anymore. In the end, what matters to me is that despite all the pain and chaos, I was able to break free. Revenge may not be the noblest solution, but in that case, it was what gave me the strength to move forward. And now, my priority is leaving the past behind and ensuring my daughters never feel they have to carry this burden. This mess is not theirs, it's entirely their mother's. Months have passed, and the dust has finally settled. My life has gradually found a new balance. My daughters and I have created a more stable routine, and despite everything that happened, the bond between us seems stronger. They still have occasional contact with their mother, but it's clear that the relationship is strained. I try not to interfere because, despite everything, I know they need to decide for themselves how to deal with her. My ex-wife, on the other hand, never managed to fully recover. After moving to another city, she disappeared from the social radar. What I heard through acquaintances was that she lived in a kind of self-imposed exile, trying to avoid public scrutiny. The irony is that she was never truly confronted by all those who criticized her. The weight she carried was mostly imposed by herself, as she faced the consequences of her actions. Steve also disappeared. I haven't heard anything about him since learning he lost his job and his marriage. His story was just another piece of a larger puzzle of bad choices that surfaced and ruined lives. As for me, after everything I did, I can say that the sense of justice came with a certain discomfort. I got what I wanted. I morally destroyed the people who betrayed and hurt me. Their public humiliation was exact, precise, and inescapable. However, at the same time, it was the dirtiest thing I've ever done in my life. Watching their faces twist in shame and despair as their reputations were shattered was, in some way, gratifying. It was disgusting, yes, but I won't lie, I felt pleasure. Not because I enjoy seeing others suffer, but because it was a direct reflection of what they did to me. That sense of satisfaction, however brief, came with a price. Sometimes I find myself reflecting on whether it was the best path. Not for them. They deserved every piece of that exposure. But for myself, publicly exposing all of that, even removing the personal parts, was an act that required me to dive into the depths of my anger and indignation. And although I emerged stronger, a part of me still feels I touched something dark within myself to get there. Today, I am focused on rebuilding a healthy life for me and my daughters. I've returned my focus to my career, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during the marriage, and I'm even beginning to consider a future where a new relationship might be possible. But now, I'm much more cautious, much more vigilant. I no longer allow anyone to cross the boundaries I've set. I learned, in the hardest way, that trust is something precious and easy to destroy. Sometimes I still think about how everything unfolded. I think about how the betrayal began with small lies, moments of neglect, and a lack of respect. I think about how I overlooked signs that might have changed the course of things if I had acted earlier. But I no longer dwell on that. I have no regrets about exposing the truth. Only the certainty that it was the way I found to regain control of my life. And in the end, when I look at my daughters and see that they still have hope, that they still believe in something better, I know I did what needed to be done. Yes, it was the dirtiest thing I've ever done, but in a way, it was also the most liberating. And with that, I close this chapter of my life, ready to look forward and build something new, leaving the weight of the past where it belongs.